Last week I reviewed Boom and gave it a very positive review. Maybe I exaggerated a bit in the title and thumbnail, but I stand by what I said. It's a good, solid episode. Unfortunately, YouTube recommended the video to a lot of people who do not like this era of Doctor Who, even the good episodes, and I was inundated with negative comments. I turned off notifications because all the abuse was getting a bit much, but it was not a nice experience. So I was hoping that this episode would be a really bad one, so I can give it a good kicking and I won't be bullied by the cool kids again. Unfortunately, it's another good one, with a really creepy atmosphere throughout. I'm not sure it all holds together in the end, but it's a very interesting episode, and I'm sure it will be discussed for years to come. All those who don't like the current Doctor might actually enjoy this episode, as he's barely in it. It's a risk to have a Doctor Light episode in the first half of the series, but I always enjoy the episodes where they shake up the format like this. Blink, Turn Left, even Love and Monsters, which a lot of people hated. It's always really interesting to see what happens in this world when the Doctor isn't around. It also gives a chance for Millie Gibson to take the lead. Ruby has been a bit of a generic companion so far, brave and plucky but without much of a personality. Here she's in every scene and her performance holds the show together, managing to convey all of Ruby's fear, loss and loneliness as she goes through the years. And you can definitely see her having a long career ahead of her. The first half of the episode is probably the best, setting up a creepy folk horror nightmare, with beautiful coastal scenery, an inn full of hostile locals, and a mysterious apparition. You can easily imagine a version of this episode where it's all in the pub during this one night, with Ruby convincing all the villagers to help her vanquish the woman and bring back the Doctor. It might have been more predictable that way, but possibly more satisfying in the end. And it would also have meant we got to see more of the great Sian Phillips, who was also in I, Claudius and David Lynch's Dune. Instead, there is an abrupt shift halfway through, as Ruby decides to give up on the Doctor and go back to her old life. To start with, this does seem plausible. She hasn't known the Doctor that long after all. But once they start skipping ahead in time, it becomes clear that this is just another alternate timeline, and everything's just going to be reset at the end, which always feels like lazy storytelling to me. It feels a lot like the episode Turn Left, which also had the companion stuck in a dystopian world without the Doctor around to help. But there are distinct differences. The Doctor's absence doesn't mean the world goes to hell, as units are now capable of taking care of everything by themselves. Instead, it's all about Ruby living a long, lonely life with a dark secret that makes anyone she tells run away and leave her for good. There's all manner of things for which this could be a metaphor, and Millie Gibson does a good job of selling the angst and loneliness that comes with it. The big climax happens when Ruby is 40, and like all 40-year-olds, she looks like a 20-year-old wearing a big pair of glasses. And she uses her apparition to take down evil politician Roger Ap Gwilym, who seems to be running on a campaign of let's start a nuclear war, and doesn't seem too bothered about hiding it. This story strand feels like a watered-down version of Years and Years, and it feels like we're only getting a bare minimum of the story, with an implication that he abuses one of his staff members, so he must be a bad guy. Whether or not he was actually the Mad Jack of folklore is left entirely to the viewer's imagination. You might expect things to return to normal after this, but instead Ruby is forced to live out the rest of her life to a ripe old age before she can go back and stop any of this from happening in the first place, which seems a bit harsh if you ask me. There are a lot of unanswered questions left, like where did the Doctor go? Why did the old woman stay exactly 73 yards from Ruby? And what exactly did she whisper to people that drove them away? In the behind the scenes episode, Russell T Davies says, "Oh, it's a mystery. What could it be? What could it be? What do you think it is? I don't know." I mean, you're the writer. It's your job to come up with a satisfying resolution. It does seem like using the supernatural might just be an excuse to avoid having to explain anything. And it always feels like a cop-out when sci-fi shows end an episode with everything going back to the beginning so that none of it ever happened. It's almost as bad as if the characters woke up and it was all a dream. It would be different if one of the characters could remember what happened, and that knowledge can affect them going forwards. But that doesn't seem to be the case here. But maybe Susan Twist or Mrs. Flood might bring up these events in a future episode, once their true natures are finally revealed. In terms of influences, the episode feels a lot like the movie It Follows, which also has a young woman being stalked by some mysterious supernatural creature. But again, it's not quite the same idea. as the old woman keeps her distance throughout and never actually harms Ruby. So it's more of a psychological horror than anything else. If anything, you'd probably get used to it after a while, which Ruby seems to do towards the end. Overall, it's an odd mixture of creepy folk horror and existential dread, with an ending that's not entirely satisfying and leaves you with a lot more questions than answers. Still, it's definitely one of the more interesting stories they've done, and it's one I will look forward to watching again. I suspect, like Ghost Lights from the original series, it will benefit greatly the more times you watch it. Next week it's Dot and Bubble, which has been advertised as the Black Mirror episode, and it looks like there may be some alien monsters again. It's about time we had some more of those. So subscribe if you like, leave a comment as long as it's polite, and I'll see you next time.